everyone. Welcome once again to Bat Chat. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Steve Bexley.
How you doing, Steve?
Good. How are you doing, Cap?
I'm good. I'm excited about today's discussion because today we're going to talk about Heart of Ice, which is a fan favorite of Batman the Animated Series. This, of course, is the introduction to Mr. Freeze in this world and arguably changed the character, well, not even arguably, changed the character forever. And it'll be fun to talk about that. If you're going to watch it with us, grab your DVDs, your Blu-rays, go to Amazon Prime, however you want to watch it, get it at timestamp 0, make sure to get past all the menus and everything, and make sure that you're watching Heart of Ice and not some other episode, because if you're watching Clayface, this will be a very different sort of commentary. We, of course, watch the episode while we're talking about it, so this will be about a 22-minute discussion. And if you want to just watch our lovely mugs talking about this, we will do our level best to provide some context for what we're talking about as we're going. It of course, is more fun to watch as a commentary, but you can do it both ways, and we try to create that option for you. Steve, are you ready to get started?
Yeah.
You want to just jump right into it?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it then. Everybody, please press play right now.
Let's also hope that your player doesn't freeze, given the context.
I see what you did there. Okay, so I gotta ask it every week, Steve. What intro did you get?
Superman, Batman, because Amazon hates me.
Really? She is. It's almost like they're taunting you on purpose.
Exactly. They had the classic intro for I've got Batman in my basement, but every good episode, it's just Superman, Batman.
Yeah, I mean, Batman in my basement, you wouldn't care if you got like the Batman intro. Or...
Well, I like the Batman intro, so that's
no, I know,
improvement.
I'm just saying that for that, you wouldn't care if it was even related to the show you were watching.
That's true. We could be watching Freakazoid at that point.
This, you want that classic experience that you had when you saw it when you were a kid, because it's one of those really good classic tentpole episodes.
Yeah, exactly. This is the one most people remember, regardless of how long it's been since they've seen it. And we'll talk about some of the animation touches and some of the dialogue and even some of the mistakes that make it so memorable.
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that before this, Mr. Freeze was a character that was arguably one of the second stringers. It was a character that people had heard of, and probably mostly from the 60s show, but he's not a character that you could really describe very well, right? He's the guy with the freeze gun. That's what he is. And this show, being as creative as it was, would take some of these lesser known characters and make them an actual character and do something with them. And I really love this opening introduction to Mr. Freeze. It reminds me a lot of classic Disney movies. It looks kind of Snow White-ish, and I wonder if that's not done on purpose.
Yeah, it's probably there as influence a little bit. You can even tell with like some of the animation filters and stuff, it feels like a faded Disney film in some areas. Also, part of what makes Freeze work so well is the guy that we've got for his voice. He's fantastic. Michael Ansari, I think his name is. But he doesn't do much else that I know of, but he's got a really distinctive voice, and the way he's able to just monologue and talk in almost highbrow language without ever necessarily saying things that are of substance, it still really works. He's able to just make any line of dialogue sound menacing and effective.
The guy who is responsible for creating Mr. Freeze is named Ferris Boyle, because, he sounds like a nice guy. There's nothing suspicious sounding about that name. One of these things is not like the others.
I wish my computer would just assemble all the machines I need in the exact order that they would go in.
Yeah, I think Batman just modified one of those, matching game programs.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if he couldn't see how those went together, how is he really a detective?
That's a really good point. Well, once again, that's one of the places where the fact that it's a kid show kind of comes right into focus. Hairspray and toothpaste won't do it on their own, but combined.
So this episode's also got some really good cuts and directing. Like every scene, it doesn't necessarily just fade into the next. There's always a kind of lingering, and kind of like what we saw in Never Too Late, where we get the same shot that transitions into the next scene, and it almost makes it look like the whole city is connected somehow in certain ways or in certain thematic ideas. We get Batman in the Batcave, and we see him just kind of scowling, trying to figure out what's going on. We immediately cut to the police, and then the Batmobile jumps out of nowhere in that really clever angle in that action sequence. It makes the pacing really good.
I think one of the reasons people remember this episode so well is that it feels like an event somehow. You know,
Yeah.
like this feels like, I don't know. It's got this air of significance about it. Like now we're creating a thing as opposed to just doing, stories and characters that you're already familiar with. And they reinvented most things, but I'm just saying that, like, it really feels like that. They're kind of, not in a bad way, but kind of putting that right in the forefront. This chase scene is spectacular, and like you said, I'm really impressed with some of the choices of angle and the storyboarding for the Batmobile.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. It reminds me of Sub-Zero, where Sub-Zero's not necessarily a good movie, but it's got some of the best animation of the entire DC animated universe.
When you look at Batman and Robin, you start to notice that they borrowed heavily not just from the backstory for Mr. Freeze in the animated series in making it, Mr. Freeze trying to cure his wife and all that, but even like this truck that Mr. Freeze drives in looks a little bit like the Mr. Freeze truck in Batman and Robin. They clearly went back, and the only research they did was this episode.
Well, to be fair, there wasn't a lot of other research. You could go to the other significant point where the '60s show renamed him Mr. Freeze, but other than that, this is the only part of his history that's relevant.
It's true. I forgot that was a rename. I actually would go as far as to say to think that if they, oh geez, Batman says freeze. That's that's hilarious. Yeah. Well, it's funny though, because you can't help but make ice puns when you're dealing with Mr. Freeze. It doesn't matter if you're a serious narrative or not. Even Batman's just like, okay, fine, I'm gonna say it. Like, Batman doesn't say that to any other villain ever. That's not like a routine thing. He doesn't know this guy's name is Mr. Freeze, and he goes, Freeze! Oh, Paul Dini! Oh, you!
Well, I mean, if he didn't shout his name like that, he was going to be afraid that Mr. Freeze would give him the cold shoulder, and no one would notice that he's trying to attack him.
That's true. Yeah, he is pretty cold. So when Batman goes up on that metal scaffolding, and Mr. Freeze freezes it and he falls through, I question that a little bit, because like he's freezing people's legs and they can't get out and stuff, but then he freezes that metal and Batman just falls right through it. Why is that?
Ice just has different properties with different materials, but I agree, because they don't give you a scientific reason as much as they just say his freeze is inconsistently convenient.
Yeah. It's just they wanted Batman to fall through right there so that the bad guys could get away. I mean, that's...
Yeah, exactly.
Primarily what we were doing there.
It's still a pretty nice sequence, though. Even the fight scenes in this episode, even if they're just like generic, we need to pad out the episode with some action, they still look really nice. They're still animated really well. There's still stuff in there that I haven't seen before, like Batman breaking through the ice with his cape.
The animation with this ice is beautiful. The animation house working on this clearly just really liked this material and really amped up the atmosphere and the ambiance on it.
Yeah, agreed.
When you listen to the commentary that Bruce Timm and his team did on this, they talk about how the animation house that did this added a lot of flourishes that weren't in the original storyboards. So there's an escalator in the Batcave.
Yes, and it's awesome. And there's like a Star Wars Batra tank right there.
Yeah, it also reminds me of the tank thing in Best of Both Worlds with Locutus.
Yeah.
it's like that. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like, once you put an escalator in the Batcave, it just feels like you're in a shopping mall. Like I've seen he's alive. I've seen versions of the Batcave where there's just no way to get from one place or another but to grapple.
Yeah, exactly like in the Arkham games.
Yeah, you're like, well, how does Alfred get to those places? And then you gotta wonder if Batman isn't purposefully keeping Alfred away from certain areas of the Batcave just because he couldn't physically get there. So Alfred in this scene brings up something that immediately makes me want to contrast Batman and Mr. Freeze's worldviews and how they look at things and their motivations, why they do what they do. When he is somewhat surprised that Batman saved this guy, because he says that this guy would have just as soon killed Batman. So why is he helping him? And it's played almost like it's kind of altruistic, and yet. Is he doing it just because he has regard for life, or is he doing it because he needs to learn about the properties of the ice gun?
Yeah, it's hard to tell either way, and we get that with other episodes as well. Like we talk about Never Too
Yeah,
Late's got the same thing, and you want to believe that Batman does it because it's the right thing to do, but even being as smart as Batman is, there's no way he didn't think about the advantage to keeping him alive as well. So then you have to wonder just how much his intention feeds into that. And since Batman's mind is already so complicated, there's a fascinating psychology that people can talk about forever. The best way
yeah.
to discuss it in short shows like this is to get people that represent small fractions of it. So we've got Ferris Boyle over here, that's the Bruce Wayne businessman side, and then we've got the
Good
revenge,
point.
tragic, motivated Mr. Freeze, and we see how Batman and Bruce juggle both of them and how they challenge them in certain respects just to kind of further flesh out who Batman is. Like this interaction we see between Bruce and Boyle, it's
Evil Reed
really well
Richards,
done. Or yeah, Ferris Boyle.
or otherwise known as Evil Reed Richards,
Yes, Evil Reed Richards, that giant red emergency
who
telephone
has a
there for the Fantastic Four. So.
who has a bat phone on his desk. I mean, like when you said that he's kind of like Bruce Wayne, I'm like, oh yeah, and he's even got what's essentially a bat phone. And I wish they would go as far as to actually like have it blink red, because that would be amazing. But no, contrasting Mr. Freeze and Batman is really interesting because they both became who they became because of personal tragedy. But one feels like he lost his humanity, and that's that word is thrown around in this. That's why the guy who created him is a humanitarian. I love that, right? He pretends to be all about other people and helping the world, but of course he's just out for himself. And meanwhile, Mr. Freeze feels like he has stolen his humanity away from him, and so now he's got to be cold and merciless, and he's decided that's just the way the world is, and there's no way around it. Whereas Batman lost obviously the people that he cared most about in the world, and the thing that keeps him going is partly the idea of I care about people and I won't let them die, or is it that it's just an obsession with not seeing the same thing happen to other kids that happened to him, and then it's more of just a psychosis than it actually is a hell. Like, is he really that different from Mister Freeze? Is it just Is it just the situation?
Yeah.
And it's ambiguous, and we could talk about it forever, and I really like that.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a whole discussion just right here about whether or not Bruce and Mr. Freeze's intents really matter and what they're trying to do, because they're both after revenge in certain respects. It's just a
Right.
matter of what makes Batman's better than Mr. Freeze's. A
Wow,
lot of that just goes down to. Sorry, what?
Batman goes all out when he's undercover, man. He's like bleached his eyebrows and his hair, and you gotta wonder when he puts his cowl back on if it's still yellow underneath. That's great. Like what if the cowl got off kilter a little bit? There's like, wait a minute, why does Batman have yellow eyebrows?
Well, I mean, it's clearly there. So when someone captures him, they're like, "Who's this dude?"
Yeah.
It's
Well, you know how we can be sure that Batman still has a little bit of compassion and still cares about people because in the previous scene he had chicken soup for Batman's soul.
Oh, that's fantastic. But there, because and I like the humanitarian aspect of this because a lot of what Batman does, especially considering he's still a vigilante and he's still sort of breaking the law, is he provides an advantage to the disadvantaged of the city in a way that Mr. Freeze doesn't. So Mr. Freeze says the world's unfair and his whole motivation is revenge, and Bruce has got that too. But Freeze doesn't do about that, nor does he acknowledge that other people have it. It's all about the personal tragedy, and it never escapes that. But Batman's whole thing is, I don't want this to happen to anyone else. And so in
Yeah.
doing that, he makes sure that people like Mr. Freeze have the advantage of getting someone like Batman to fight on their side. It's just Freeze is too far gone for that.
Well, and I mean, we don't see Mr. Freeze's reaction to how anybody else does anything else, but you could potentially extrapolate, or maybe it would be the case that Mr. Freeze would expect, after what he's gone through, for everyone who had a similar situation that he did to act like he does. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
like is he that far gone? I mean, he is, but maybe it's that his worldview is everyone is like this. There's no such thing as humanity. Is it that he got it taken away from him, or is it that this Ferris Boyle guy proved that there is no such thing?
Yeah, no, that's a good call. Especially
You know,
considering that Ferris Boyle is the guy that's in charge, right? Like he's the top
yeah.
top dog as far as concerned. So if people are like that at the top, what does it matter what they're like on the bottom? Because they can't get what they need.
Yeah, it's a kill or be killed kind of scenario, and it makes him almost, I don't know, is it almost a nihilistic kind of thing?
Um, a little bit. It's not necessarily nihilistic because things matter in Frieza's perspective. It's just that they matter only for him. So
Yeah.
there's like an inherent consequential principle for himself. So
Well, okay, it's cynical if it's anything.
yeah, it's cynical. It's still a matter though of Frieza's got a principle that he kind of wants everyone to adopt to a certain extent. Just be out for yourself,
Yeah.
because that's the only way you'll ever get any satisfaction. And hey, another Empire reference right here.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, hanging upside down in a cave. That's a really good point.
Yeah, without his handy utility belt. This is totally Empire.
You gotta wonder what would happen if Batman just pulled that canister off the back of his bag. Like if I were Batman, that's the first thing I would try. But he hasn't faced Bane yet. Like after he faces Bane, anybody that's got like that one clear thing, it's like, okay, the guy's got a button on his face. You better push that button. And maybe he'll blow up, you know. Intelligent villains always take Batman's utility belt.
Yes, they do. And it always works for at least a couple minutes, and the villain gives us a nice long motivation speech. But with Mr. Freeze, it works. Guys just like listening to him talk.
This villain origin is similar to Two-Face's, and I like that we don't straight up do the origin in the episode where like we start with with Victor Freeze and then he turns into Mr. Freeze, partly because it would have taken 2 episodes probably,
right?
And just like it did with Mr. Freeze or with Two-Face, but also because I think that it would feel too much like that same scenario again, and I think that there are parallels, but they're certainly not exactly the same sort of thing. But I think that they went to those kind of villain origins on purpose a lot, because what makes a regular person turn into a villain and turn in and have this like insane view of the world is really interesting. And you always want to compare that to Batman because he's another extreme personality. So you don't want to make, like we talked about with the Two-Face episode, you don't want to make them all just these archetypes and just insane people. It's really easy to just make a character insane. Okay, anything they do is fair game because they're crazy people. But like they actually take a real person and get them there, and then contrast that with Batman, who at one point was a regular person and now he's Batman. Is what's interesting about having all these different characters, and I think I would argue has a lot to do with why Batman's Rogues Gallery is so memorable.
Yeah, it demonstrates to a certain extent like a spectrum of insanity. So we can say that Batman's rational to a point and he's crazy to a point, but there's no like complete one way about it. Freeze is crazy to a point, but he's rational as much as he's just consumed by what he wants. And then all the way on the opposite end of the spectrum, we've got the Joker. But the scary thing about him is whether or not he's actually crazy. So that certainly helps in making Batman's characters great foils for him, and you can do pretty much anything you want with any of them. Although I think a certain limitation of this origin, and it's a good origin, I really like this episode, but you can't really do anything with Mr. Freeze after this, can you?
Yeah, and that is definitely the problem with it. Oh, you know what I almost said earlier, and I forgot to get back to this real quick. With the Batman, when I was talking about Batman and Robin, I think if they had done more research beyond this episode, we would have had a Schwarzenegger head with spindly legs at the end. I really think that would have happened.
I want that. I totally want that now. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I know, right? But no, you're absolutely right. That is the problem with this. Is that once I mean, I would argue that the place to go after this is what they did. What if you could cure Nora Freeze? But after that happens, or after it's proven that you can, or if you kill her, or let her move on with her life, or whatever you do, yeah, what do you do after that? I mean, he really is just this cold, emotionless character who certainly has this huge emotion behind him, which is this thirst for revenge because he lost his humanity. It's a cool dichotomy. It's almost like what if Spock was evil?
Yeah.
You kind of have that, and but like to keep giving him, what would his motivation be after that?
Yeah, and Scott Snyder tried to deal with that a little bit in his first Batman annual, where he just essentially said that Nora Freeze was not Victor's wife. She was just a famous cryogenics patient that Freeze got obsessed with.
And I liked that story, but I mean, I understand why a lot of people didn't, because it kind of made him just another crazy person. But even that story, I don't know where you go after that.
I mean, I feel like you've gotten more degrees of freedom with that version of Freeze because he is just crazy. That's why I don't like it, is because he's just crazy. You lose the spectrum analysis that we got before. You lose that Freeze can be sympathized with or understood to a point.
Yeah.
He regresses far more in that kind of story. And I think you could do a Freeze story where he's just rational and cold-hearted, and that's what the Batman does with it, where you get his origin and it's a very simple motivation and he just keeps going. I think it has the most longevity of any Mr. Freeze origin we've gotten.
I don't know. The argument I would make is, first of all, if you just make him a crazy person like that, then he's too much like too many other villains, and why use Freeze over anybody else?
Yeah.
But also, I would do, and I don't know why this hasn't happened. I would do what I'm trying to remember who was writing that, but what was done in like Gotham City Sirens, and right before that with the Riddler, where he attempted to go straight. I would do that with Mr. Freeze. You know, like let him go. Okay, I don't really have any reason to live anymore in any purpose, and like whoever it was that I really wanted revenge on, I've already kind of taken care of. I still feel the way I feel about things, but there's no reason for me not to use my abilities for good, I guess. Where he's just indifferent now. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I don't know. I think that could be really interesting.
Yeah, it's possible. The Batman Beyond episode that had Mr. Freeze in it opened with him being a genuinely good person. It was just circumstance once again got the better of him. But if that doesn't happen, if he just has the ability to keep going, like that'd be an interesting way to put the status quo.
So Batman takes out Mr. Freeze with chicken noodle soup,
which is amazing.
Which is great. We haven't talked about the fact that Ferris is played by Mark Hamill.
Yes.
I think the only as far as I know, the only kind of like not costumed crazy character that Mark Hamill voiced. And at first I was like, oh, that sounds a lot like Mark Hamill, and then I realized that it actually was Mark Hamill. And that's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's cool. I think Mark Hamill actually makes a lot of cameos just sporadically throughout the series because they've always gotten him. But it's hard to notice sometimes because his voice is kind of flexible. In this scene, Paul Dini and Bruce Timm actually wanted him to cry snowflakes.
That's right. Which he does in Batman and Robin.
Yes, he does. And to this day, I don't know if it would have worked here. I don't think it would have, honestly. But it's possible. It's hard to say.
I can kind of almost see Mr. Freeze as almost like a frozen version of the Punisher.
Yeah.
Because he has that whole vengeance versus justice thing where he thinks they're the same.
Yeah, good call.
And then we're about to get this brilliant shot of Batman in front of the moon, which is just
that's great.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Steve, this is another super tightly written episode. There's another episode that shows you what you can do in 22 minutes. Everything feels necessary, and it's another episode like we talked about with one a couple weeks ago. I'm trying to remember the name of that.
Never Too Late.
Never Too Late. Thank you. That feels like a 22-page comic book.
Yeah, agreed. They do a lot here, and they adapted this exact story into the comics once, and it only took one issue to tell. So
of course. That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know that. Well, final thoughts?
Just that this episode is as fantastic as everyone says it is. And we mentioned that the origin doesn't necessarily have longevity, but it tells you something that every time people use Mr. Freeze, it's this origin now. No one changes it. With the exception of the Batman.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. And I'm not saying that you can't do other things with the character and that, it's somehow disingenuous if you don't always use this particular source material. But this is one of those, I think, probably the first big thing that this series changed forever for Batman, right? Yeah. I mean, this is one of, the big 3 or 4. It's Harley Quinn.
Well, yeah, those are the main ones. This and Harley Quinn, but I feel like arguably stuck more than Harley Quinn did. Because Harley Quinn in the comics is now nothing like what she was here, and the joke is completely different there.
Well, that's true. I'm just talking about what it created. Because I mean, you could almost go as far as to say that this show created Mr. Freeze. We had Mr. Freeze, but I think that if it weren't for the show, it would be really easy to keep doing a lot of Batman stories, and he rarely shows up. You know what I mean? I think he shows up a lot more now because of this. Maybe that's overstating it, but I'm not sure that it is.
No,
So
I
I'm
don't
just
think it
saying that,
is.
like,
No, I agree with you. You could say
yeah,
even though that 60s renamed him Mr. Freeze, he was essentially just Mr. Zero for a while until this show, because nothing evolved with that
yeah.
character since he came out until this.
What's really interesting about the '60s show, and again, I listened to the commentary from Bruce Timm and his crew on this, and Bruce Timm talks about how he was just kind of silly and a joke in the '60s show, and that's not wholly true because he mentioned Otto Preminger, and everybody brings up Otto Preminger like he was the only person that played him, but we had 3 different Mr. Freezes for the 3 different episodes,
Yeah.
and when he was first introduced, he was a lot closer to this version.
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
it's very interesting. Yeah, it was a revenge motive. He was not real jokey. He had ice puns, but they were subtle, like they are in that. Not subtle, but I mean like from the perspective of that character, he wasn't being clever. He wasn't the Otto Preminger Wild thing, and I don't know where that came from. And then the third time we did the character, he suddenly sounded like he was from a different country, and he also didn't say Wild anymore, and I don't know why that is. But the first time we had him, they did the cold gimmick as the emotional coldness thing, where he couldn't feel.
Oh.
It was the same thing, and he wanted revenge on. This is, I think, the first time that you had a villain that wasn't just trying to steal stuff, but actually like wanted revenge on Batman for doing something. This was the first time that you had a villain that wanted revenge on Batman for creating him. And Batman actually was apparently who accidentally made Mr. Freeze, and he wanted revenge on him, and he was merciless and cold. It was really similar to this.
Wow, that's awesome. I didn't know that.
I'm not saying it's a super serious episode, but it's closer. It was in the early days when it was still, of course, parody, but it was a little. It tried to look a little edgier, and the color palette was a lot darker.
Yeah, I need to go back and watch the episode because I haven't seen all of 60s. I've only seen parts of it. It's been years, so it's interesting to see
Yeah,
that they did some of that earlier on.
it's cool. It's just unfortunate that Preminger eclipsed him, and the only reason that happened was because he was so popular. He was a huge actor at that point, so
Yeah, I can see that.
yeah.
No, that's interesting. And Mr. Freeze seems to always have some kind of bigger talent behind him. Like you mentioned, the 60s show. This design was created by Mike Mignola. So, like, there's a
I didn't
good,
know that.
like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie, there's a good history of Mr. Freeze almost being smaller than the people that are responsible for making him.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't. He's just not inherently an interesting character, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's just another gimmick. He's inherently a really cool looking, it's kind of a compelling image, a guy who can make things freeze, and then what would that tell you about his personality? And I would say somehow that's even more compelling to me than like a Heat guy.
Yeah.
But and then like there's places you can go with that. Something else, real quick, something else I meant to mention is I like how how a couple episodes ago in the Flash in the current season of the Flash. We're now dating this show, but a couple episodes ago in the Flash you had Heatwave and Captain Cold, and they were doing a whole thematic thing with Cold representing people being level-headed, and Heat representing people being hot-headed. And I like that this does the emotional spectrum in a different way, where it's the ability to feel versus the ability not to feel.
Yeah, no, good call. That's a really good point. I mean,
There's a lot of different ways to take. Sorry, there's a lot of different ways to take the hot and the cold thing. To take the barometer of the thermometer, right?
yeah.
And metaphorically translate that to the human condition.
Yeah, and there's a lot of issues and episodes of TV shows where beating Mr. Freeze involves getting him mad, making him hotter in that respect. And so maybe the fact that he's
Yeah,
detached is his greatest key, and that's what the coldness is. That it's not inherently there, but he forces it to be there. Um,
yeah.
One final thing before we end off, though, I wanted to ask you how would have felt if Leonard Nimoy actually accepted the role and played Mr. Freeze here?
I didn't know that he had been offered it.
Yeah, he was offered early on during production, but he declined for some reason.
I think that would have been a wonderful coup because, as I said, it's like Evil Spock. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a character that is refusing to show emotion and claiming almost in denial that he's incapable of it, but clearly has a deep-seated emotion that drives everything he does. And the Vulcans are exactly that way.
Yeah, no,
It's
exactly.
just it just doesn't necessarily have to manifest itself in a negative kind of way. But that's explored. That's just explored a lot with the character of Spock. What kind of a person are you if you bury emotions you have all the time? And like I said, the Vulcans are always in denial about it. It's like, well, yeah, they do feel, but they choose not to because they think that they can live better lives that way, and then they just lie to everyone saying that they don't have emotion, which is an inherent contradiction in their philosophy and the way they live their lives, because one of the worst things you can do in their moral tenets is lie to people.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, that just reminds me of that episode where Spock breaks down because of some drug that's taking over the ship, and
Mm-hmm.
we get to see their new range of happiness and sadness and anger.
Yeah, are you talking about when he gets hit with the plant spores?
I think so. I'm not sure. I haven't seen TOS in a while, but I think that's the episode.
Yeah, that's oh man, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's something syndrome. Why isn't it coming to me? I know as soon as we end here, I'm gonna remember it. But my head's in Batman mode right now, not Star Trek mode. But
They could have been merged right here though if Nimoy got the role.
it's wait, no, it's not Paradise. It's This Side of Paradise. This
Oh,
Side of Paradise. That's the name of the episode. But yeah, so yeah, it would have been really cool if Leonard Nimoy had gotten it. But having grown up with this and really liking this performance, this guy's the Mr. Freeze that's always in my head.
yeah, same with
And
me.
and especially because of the way they modulated it in post, the kind of almost mechanical sound that his voice has. It was an inspired choice to make him sound like he does.
Yeah, and they're consistent with that all the way through. So even in Batman Beyond, when he's nothing but like a head, or in just where he's just walking around on those legs, there's still that mechanical twitch to his noise. There's almost something synthetic about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, we'll go ahead and end off here. Thanks everybody for watching. Sure appreciate it. And what do you think of this episode? Leave your comments and tell us if you like and what you think about Heart of Ice. And we'll see you again next week. What is next week's episode?
The Cat and the Claw, the two-parter.
Oh, okay, all right, cool. So we'll have another two-parter for you next week. That's that's Red Claw, which is another connection to Star Trek, because that's Kate Mulgrew doing a Russian accent.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know Star Trek had so many people on Batman.
Tons of them, and I'll continue to point some of them out as we go along. There's quite a bit. We'll get to Matt Frewer when we get to what is that episode where the Joker. What is it? The Man Who Killed Batman?
The Man Who Killed Batman. You mean the one with that little tiny guy that everyone thinks killed
Yeah,
Batman? Yeah, the Man Who
yeah.
Killed Batman.
That's Matt Frewer.
Oh, cool.
Who was Max Headroom and was what's his name, Moloch in Watchmen,
Oh, cool.
and he was in my one of my very very favorite episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation, A Matter of Time, where he plays Berlinghoff Rasmussen and makes everybody on the ship think that he comes from eons in the future, and it's really funny, and it's a great episode. But yeah, he's in it. So, well, everybody, thanks again for watching. Sure appreciate it. We'll see you next week. I'm Captain Logan.
I'm Steve.
Yeah.